Hello and welcome to this joint podcast between Howarths and Met Recruitment Limited. My name is Charlotte Geesin and I am Legal Director at Howarths, and I am joined by Matt. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, you're right.
I am joined by Matt Hunter, who is the Industrial Director at Met. Matt and I have had a few conversations over recent weeks and months with regards to the so-called labour crisis. There's been plenty in the media in recent weeks and months, as I say, with regards to Brexit, lorry driver shortages. We're facing a potential turkey shortage for Christmas, I believe now, and we've kind of hit on some sort of what we think, certainly, Matt, isn't it? Some interesting points.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we decided to team up to record this podcast to try and give you a sort of rounded view, really, on the issues as we see them. So in my role, I predominantly advise SME businesses and employers on how to recruit, retain, and manage staff. Matt comes at it from a slightly different angle insofar as he's working with those same organisations, but he is at the forefront of the recruitment. He's seeing the individuals who are looking for work, and he's having certain conversations with them about what it is they're looking for given the sort of changed employment landscape. According to the most recent statistics, the UK labour market now has the lowest ever number of unemployed people per vacancy. And that's the key measure, which is used in assessing the balance between labour demand and labour supply. In the period June to August 2021, which is the last period we have the stats for at the time of this recording, there were 1.45 unemployed people per vacancy. And as job openings continuing to set records whilst unemployment fell back. At the height of the COVID-19 crisis in April and June last year, this figure was 4.1 unemployed people per vacancy. While before the crisis, in data stretching all the way back to 1971, the figure has never been lower than 1.5. So these figures are quite shocking and certainly unusual if you sort of look at the sort of historical trends. Much of the current focus about this so-called labour crisis has been on specific skill shortages relating to HGV driving and Brexit. However, these latest figures reiterate that these are labour shortages affecting the whole economy, and where likely between a quarter and a third is explained by lower migration. It has been estimated that the UK also has a labour gap of around 900,000, and that's between the number of people in the labour market currently and what would have been expected based on pre-crisis trends. This trend is considered to be being driven by large falls in participation in the labour market, specifically for older people and younger people, alongside continued wide employment gaps for disabled people and those with health conditions which have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis. So during the course of this podcast, then, Matt and I, from our respective employer and employee focused positions, are going to consider some of the causes of the current labour market crisis and what the key issues appear to be. After sharing our views on this point, we will then consider what employers can do, should do, perhaps when it comes to addressing their recruitment and linked retention issues, taking into account the post-Brexit, post-COVID landscape. So Matt, I'll stop talking for a few minutes and give you the stage. So do you want to perhaps start by outlining your sort of experience in the last few months of the labour market crisis in the recruitment sector?
Yeah, it's been crazy. I've never known it like this, to be fair. I think you can't really, if you look back on the last 12 to 18 months, nothing's been normal really, has it? And it seems to have gone from one extreme when COVID started and everyone feared that they'd lose their job to now everyone being offered jobs left, right, and centre. From my point of view, because I look after like the industrial side of the business, so you're talking warehouse, factories, like the lower paid jobs. It's very competitive out there. There isn't enough people to do these jobs, or that these jobs aren't being rewarded properly by the employers. I think that's a big one as well. I think in recent years, there's always been an abundance of people to do the job. So there hasn't been the competition to get to pay the going rate for it, because the national minimum wage was there and people can use it to the best of their ability. Whereas now I think just because the national minimum wage is there, I don't think it's the first thing that people will go to when looking for jobs. They will. There's that much choice that they can pick and choose, and there is so much choice that people are jumping from one job, especially on the temporary labour side. People do jump. Stability is kind of not needed at the moment because there is so many jobs out there. That's my view. That's my view on it. It is really, really busy. We as a business, it's for the consultants, it's always probably been about a 50-50 split between selling to businesses and selling to workers. I'd probably say it's probably about 90-10 now, with just selling the positions that we've got from clients that are knocking on our door to the workers, and kind of speaking to people, finding out what they're doing, and if we've got anything that's that little bit of a more attractive job than what they've got at the moment.
Wow. So that's quite interesting there. You say that the current sort of split for your consultants is 90-10. So if you had to sort of say, I don't know, give an example, a figure representation of the difference in the number of vacancies when compared to the number of applicants, what could you do that? Sort of how many applicants have you got for each available job?
Well, for every job that we've got, we haven't got enough applicants.
Right.
I'm from quite not an old school industrial recruitment like mentality, but I wouldn't, when I was on a desk, I wouldn't want to leave the office until every kind of temporary job that we've got would be filled. You'd have all the bookings on the board, and you'd know this company A wants however many people for tomorrow, company B needs X amount. You just haven't got the hours in the day to fill them all at the moment. So people are kind of having what's available, and going back to where you say applicants, it's almost like you are trying to speak to other people that are already in temporary work, and you're trying to get them to choose your jobs over A, the job that they've got, or B, other jobs that they've been offered.
Interesting, very interesting. So a little bit of sneaky poaching going on then, the sound of it.
Yeah, you've got to look after the workers that you've got, and you've got to make sure that because don't get me wrong, they'll be getting calls left, right, and centre from other agencies, from other employers, and on top of that, a majority of the people that are working for an agency, their end goal is to get a permanent job somewhere. There is a small percentage of people that like the flexibility to it, but a lot of people nowadays see going to a recruitment agency and registering with them as the best way of finding permanent employment at the end of the day. So it's just the whole vision of it has just switched completely, in my opinion.
Yeah. So when you were talking initially, you made the statement that there's just not enough people, and I think that's something that I would agree with, actually, based on the experience that we have had with employers over the last few weeks and months. There's a definite lean, I think, in attitude towards Brexit, being seen as a very big part of the problem. And I think Brexit coupled with COVID has kind of created this almost imperfect, perfect storm when it comes to the labour market. Certainly, the new immigration system, which was introduced at the start of this year, has limited not only the number of skilled workers who can come into the UK, but more importantly, those unskilled workers. So now there is no automatic ability for unskilled workers to come across to fill those typically lower paid jobs, which, like I say, could be certainly a contributing factor to the idea that there just isn't enough people. What are your views, Matt, on the sort of depth of this Brexit effect? Do you agree that Brexit is the problem or a big part of the problem, or do you think it's just an easy scapegoat argument because people don't like Brexit?
I think, well, you can think what you like on Brexit. I think it's happened. It is what it is. We've all got to kind of deal with the aftermath of it. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, though, about the timing of it. It was always going to make problems in the recruitment industry, especially like you say with the unskilled workers coming over. There's always jobs for unskilled workers, and we did as a country, I believe, rely a lot on foreign nationals coming over and doing those jobs. Brexit has stopped people from being able to do that, but COVID happening at the same time as well has completely just blown it all out of the water, to the point where if they thought there was going to be a part of a problem, that part of the problem is now a massive problem in my eyes. It's even the people that maybe wanted to come over before the cutoff date, they couldn't because of restrictions. Mm-hmm. So if they were expecting, right, we're going to put this date here, and if you've not been in the country for a certain amount of time before this date and gone down the actual applying route, then you won't be allowed in. So they must have had figures to show that we're going to have an influx towards the end of this of X amount of people. That never happened. So if it's just made it a little bit worse. And I know you said at the start, obviously there's been specific skill shortages related to like HGV driving and stuff like that. That's obviously a skilled role. So when you have the issues on the skilled roles, like I think it started to creep up a little bit over the last month, but there seemed to be a big reluctance just to talk about it was just HGV drivers. This is the problem. But then when you have like the people from like Two Sisters Foods coming out and going, look, we're not going to have enough people to work in the chicken factories or the poultry factories to make sure you're getting your turkeys and your chickens over Christmas, that's when you realise it is a big, big issue. And I think it's only going to get worse because everyone who comes over here, and well, not everyone, but there is the majority of the people that come over here to do kind of the unskilled work, they don't stay in the unskilled environment. They come over here to do the unskilled work as the first step on the ladder, and then they progress. So even with the people that were left with for the foreign nationals coming over, they're not going to want to stay and do the unskilled work. They're here to make a life for themselves, make money and progress. Yeah, you can push the national minimum wage up as much as you want, but it's not going to help the fact that you are always going to get, and well, going forward, unless something changes, there is going to be a shortage of people that will do that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think there is a big problem. I'm not sure where I sit on the national minimum wage point particularly, but I do think that the SME market in particular is being disproportionately affected and disadvantaged by this shift in employment landscape. Your typical sort of SME business will have all tiers of employee, won't it? Right from sort of director level, CEO level, to management, middle management, supervisors, and then you'll have the lads and ladies who are on the floor undertaking some of the harder, less skilled work, the work that's perhaps not as well paid. And I think an SME business's structure isn't necessarily unique in that sense, and certainly, I guess, in the industrial, commercial, and technical sort of organisations that you particularly work with, Matt, you'll find that that's the same there. I think unless the immigration system changes to enable it to make it easier to bring people, for employers to bring people into the UK for the purposes of that less skilled work, I think you're right when you say that there's a problem that's going to persist and perhaps get worse, because it's clear, it doesn't matter how much the government suggest that we look at the domestic labour market. Something's not quite working. And whatever the reason that is, whether it's Brexit, COVID, a general reluctance of people to undertake certain work for whatever reason, I don't know, but I think there needs to be some admission that there certainly is a problem. I think when it comes to the immigration provisions which are in place at the moment, they are quite costly and quite prohibitive actually to some of the SME market. Obviously, there's no automatic provision to bring unskilled workers into the UK anymore. There has to be an element of skill threshold. And it's an interesting point actually you make about the drivers, because strictly speaking, that's not classed as a skilled role in all aspects. Yeah. When it comes to the immigration system, there's calls for more driving activities to be brought part of the skilled worker categorisation, and certainly the labour shortage. Although you would have thought it was certainly a skilled position that would justify employment. Nevertheless, I think the immigration system itself, like I say, it's cost prohibitive, and I don't know if you've sort of come across that at all. With any of the organisations that you work with, have they had any issues with the new system, the immigration system?
Not necessarily with the system, really. It's moved quite. I mean, it's been transitioned quite easily. I mean, it is black and white. If you have you have your right to work that you can check online. If you don't have it, you can't work. It is as simple as that. I personally haven't. You probably have dealt with companies that have gone down the sponsored route and brought people in on that. From my side, I haven't really. I've had a look at the ways people, what you have to do for a sponsorship, and it does, like you said, it is quite costly to kind of to bring someone in. So you wouldn't do it for any kind of like lower paid work. It is just a case of just trying to find people in the market at the moment, and to do that, you have to make your jobs look more attractive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you probably know this more than me. Have people had problems with the sponsorship route?
They haven't had problems in the sense that the process kind of works. The issue is the cost. It's prohibitive. It's can be up to £1,500 to actually apply for the license itself. Then there are additional costs when it comes to health surcharges, individual certificates of sponsorship, and actually for your sort of standard SME type business, those costs just outweigh any potential benefit. And I think, and you mentioned this as well already, the key for a lot of employers now is going to be having an attitude shift in terms of making what they have more attractive to the labour market. And I think unless that happens, and unless employers are willing to accept that that's something that they're really going to have to give consideration to doing, then they may find themselves in a difficult spot should, as you say, Matt, this issue persist and or even get worse. I mean, from our perspective, one thing that is absolutely clear is that employees, either new employees, so people who are applying for jobs or at the recruitment stage, like your guys, and people who are already in employment, they see massive value in hybrid working and flexible working. Obviously, it was all sort of thrust upon us by the government in the midst of the pandemic, and maybe we'll see some more enforced home working over the next few months, who knows. But irrespective of the way it's come about, it has offered so many people so much more in terms of time, work-life balance. People's priorities have shifted. I know it's a bit of a cliche to say it, but they've shifted during COVID. And now people don't want to commute to the office 5 days a week. They don't even want to work 5 days a week in some cases. And I think that employers who either take a sort of strict approach when it comes to requiring workers to be in the office, and or who don't offer it as standard, will find themselves, I think, with a recruitment and or retention issue. I think you said before about individuals jumping from one job to the next because it's, you know, more attractive, and I think the point that you make about maybe the money not being everything is also probably true when the sort of value of the benefits of things like home and hybrid working have. Is that something that you'd agree with? Is that something that you're finding in practice with the people who come to you looking for work?
Yeah, well, not so much on my side because with it being factory and warehouse based, but internally recruiting for staff within, you know, Met.
Interesting.
We have seen that people do want that flexibility. It's not so much about kind of where they work. People can work from wherever, which makes it even a little bit harder sometimes, especially on the recruitment side, because when you talk about SMEs, not everyone's set up to train people remotely. Not everyone's set up to have that ability to kind of onboard staff like virtually. It's tough, especially with SMEs. Some small businesses, it's a big cost to bring someone in new, and if you get that wrong, a bad recruit can be a big expenditure that you won't get back. So a lot of people do want to bed people into the business in branch and in the office, because you get a feel for what they do, you get a feel for the person. Even interviewing remotely, don't get me wrong, everyone's gone hybrid is the new working way. I know people that have found jobs within lockdown and COVID where they might have been in the office 45 hours a week, and now they've found a new job where they're based at home and they see team members like face to face maybe once every 2 weeks. I think some companies are really set up for that, but I think as you go smaller and down into like the SMEs, it is really it's a tough call for someone to make. Do I bring that person in and do I give them the freedom of hybrid working straight away? And in not offering that, are you then making it harder for yourself to recruit? It can be really tough, and that's my view on it, that there's got to be a bit of flexibility from both sides. If you wanted that new job and say they wanted you to, right, we can give you hybrid working, but for our training, you need to be in the office, you need to be with the person that's going to be training you, You're not going to get those, you're not going to learn our procedures behind a screen. You're not going to bed yourself in with the team. I think it's a lot easier for teams that have been working together for a number of years to then work remotely. Don't get me wrong. I think that's fine. And I've seen that with our own team, but I think it must be so daunting for someone to come in now and work remotely from day one.
That's a really, really interesting perspective, and you're absolutely right. Like home working, yes, it can be done. We all have to do it, but actually, you're totally right when you say operationally, financially. Sometimes it's really difficult, and it's not just the employer saying no, I don't want to implement this practice. It's actually a case that they perhaps can't. In terms of your guys, the guys who have to be in the factories each day, there's no kind of option for home working. What do you think you can do, your employers can do to make those roles more attractive when the sort of hybrid home working, flexible options aren't available?
I've probably had more meetings this year with clients about this.
Oh, interesting.
Well, you used to speak to a company, they give you the job spec, they give you kind of, this is what we want, and you'd be like, yep, that's fine, we'll go work to it. Yeah. Now it's a case of you sit down and you go, well, we can advertise and we can recruit for this, but I am recruiting for 4 or 5 companies within your local area looking for exactly the same, but they're doing A, B, and C differently to you. So if you want to, I can, but the response isn't going to be as good as your competitor down the road who is also looking for warehouse staff, or who is also looking for forklift truck drivers, because they might be working on, down the road, it might be they've got incentives like if you complete a full week, you get a shift bonus. If you get shift allowance on top of what you're working, you get free food on a Friday. Everyone seems to be very competitive to want what is a smaller pool.
I like the sound of free food on a Friday, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing it.
That's really interesting, because joking aside, like free food on a Friday, it's not a massive thing, is it?
Oh no.
Depends how many people you've got to feed, but around a bacon sarnies on a Friday morning is potentially goes a long way, actually, and it's the cost of that compared to, I don't know, a bonus or some kind of extra leave perhaps after you've worked there for a certain amount of time. I don't know, it's very, very different and manageable, I think.
Yeah, I guess you've got to look at it in different ways as well, because each company's a different size. So where you have one company that, I don't know, you might have 2 companies that are struggling to, I'll use the analogy, forklift truck drivers again. 2 companies that are looking for forklift truck drivers, both on the same shift, both have the same pay rate. You could ask both of them to up the pay rate, but one company might only have a team of 5 forklift truck drivers and they need an extra 3. Well, that's fine. You're increasing the rate of 8 people. Whereas the other company, they might have a team of 50, 60 people.
Yeah.
And they might need 10 forklift truck drivers. So it's the same percentage ratio, really, roughly.
Yeah.
But for them, it's a massive cost to implement everyone. And I think pay is always going to be one of the biggest factors of why people go to work. That's why people do go to work. I don't think there's anyone that you can say goes to a job and goes, oh, I don't get paid. I get paid really, really poor, but there's this, and this. I don't think people would ever kind of, if they're in that situation, they got offered more, then they would go for more, in my view. But you've then got to look at what's the implications of it. That company might go, right, okay, well, yeah, we do need a better we do need to pay these people more, but we physically can't because it breaks the pay structure of everything that we've got.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you fix that one? It can be hard, and a lot of people just see it as it's a forklift. Pay the person a little bit more. That's great, but if we pay everybody, then the cost of the product goes up. We might not sell as many. So then wanting an extra 10 people now might result later down the line in more cuts being made, and it's a vicious cycle, I think.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And we see it all the time. And, the thing is, your cash flow is your cash flow, isn't it? You can only afford to issue pay rises that you can afford to issue. At some point, constant pay rises will cause a big problem. And in worst cases, it will cause a business to have to cease trading. And I think I said before that there's a need for employers to address, I think, cultural issues, attitudes towards being a more attractive employer. But I also think that is quite a difficult thing to do when most, I don't know whether that's a generalization, there is certainly, I think, a strong argument to say that significant portions of the workforce are driven by money. And if you can't compete in that respect, you're stuck a little bit. But I do think that hopefully there will be a portion of the workforce who do see past that. And maybe we've talked about changing priorities when it comes to the COVID crisis. Whereas previously people might not have had their heads turned by a bacon sandwich on a Friday, people actually might be turned by that now. They see the benefit in working for a company that has a laugh on a Friday morning or whatever it is, or, is a bit more prepared to be, flexible with things like doctor's appointments, perhaps, or, yes, you can knock off half an hour early if you've got to go and pick your child up from school. I don't know, something like that. So it gives a balance, but without giving too much on the strict financial side of things. And the balance itself does appeal to a certain portion of workforce.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. It isn't as simple as just paying people as much.
No, it's not.
All you do is you're bringing that gap between your unskilled and your semi-skilled and your skilled even shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
Because it would be in a brilliant world where everything went up relatable, but it just can't if there's not enough people to go around for the jobs.
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation. And I mean, I'm quite interested to see how this HGV crisis in inverted commas sort of pans out, because we're seeing, you bigger haulage companies offering 50, 60,000 pounds to go and drive a lorry, whereas actually the industry standard 6 months ago was probably more like 30. People are jumping for the money and you can't knock them for that. But how long is that sustainable for? And what happens when actually this bubble that we're all in does pop? These people who've left positions to go and work for jobs, work for companies who are paying these massive salaries, is there any job security there? Perhaps not. And maybe when it comes to recruitment strategies, retention strategies, certainly, the employers who do think more creatively about ways in which they can be more attractive have a sell in that. They can say, look, yes, we don't pay as much here, but actually this means that we can offer you these extra benefits and we can offer you stability as far as anybody is able to offer you stability, because we have a specific structure that we work to. It takes into account the whole organisation. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of saying it out loud and I'm thinking, would that wash? I don't know. Would that be something that if going to work down the road for slightly more money, would it work? I don't know.
I think you can always tell. I think you can always tell a lot in a business about the longevity of the staff that have been there.
Yeah.
If you walk into an office and so has been here 6 years, 7 years, and you see people have progressed within the business, I think that speaks volumes, regardless of what they're paying at the moment, as to kind of like the market and the economy is very strong. There's no denying that. COVID has happened and the government has supported the economy brilliantly. The support there has been fantastic for everyone, but it's resulted in a very, very good, buoyant economy. How long will that last? Is there going to be the need for, HGV drivers 3 years down the line getting paid 60 grand? If they've got a team of 4, they'll look at it and they could go, well, we might only need 2 if we've still got to pay them 60 grand. And it, like you said before, it is going to be interesting to see how long this can go on for, I think.
Yeah. We'll have to watch the news for the next few weeks with bated breath, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think we've covered a good amount there, Matt. But I suppose on a final point, and I guess the $64 million question for you is, why is recruitment an important exercise to get right? Because ultimately, if you get your recruitment spot on, all of this becomes, to some extent, a bit of an irrelevance. If you can get the right candidates, get the good workers in, and keep them happy, Bob's your uncle, I would have thought. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I touched upon it a little bit earlier. The cost of bad recruitment sometimes is just as kind of important than the cost of good recruitment. If it's good recruitment, you're only going to do it when you need to do it. If it's bad recruitment, you are going to constantly need to recruit, because people will lose, faith in where they're working. They will move on. There's always going to be a natural part, and people will always progress, and they might progress quicker than where they're working. That's the biggest one. The cost of a bad recruit far outweighs the cost of doing it the right way. That's my view on it. It's a little bit different on like the side of the industrial, where you do have flexes. People do go busy and they have peak business, and you need that certain percentage. And that again, though, is the benefit of having someone that you use that knows the business well, is they're bringing in the right people. So the training, the induction process, that's all there. So the right people are coming in. You need someone for 6 months. You would much rather have someone for 6 months than have 3 people for 2 months each, because 2 months down the line, you've got to swap them because they're not working out. And you go back to the beginning and their skill set is back to zero, and they're just not learning the right way, really. So yeah, from my point of view, it's not, everyone's here to sell a little bit, but my advice is if you are using a recruitment agency, make sure that they know the business more. The more information you can give them, the more you can work with them, and not just see them as a necessary evil, is so beneficial.
Yeah, I do think that's a good point, Matt. Knowing your business and knowing your people and knowing what works for you is so important. And whilst there is so much competition out there, it is more important than ever. It really, really is. And I suppose on a maybe a final point for me is that, I agree that a bad recruit is a really bad thing. It's, it can be costly, but also it can be demotivating. It can be culturally damaging as well. And I think, as well as taking into consideration the recruitment process, the retention is also massively, massively important. You've got to keep the people who you've got on board happy, and they will see recruitment exercises. They might see people brought on board who aren't the right fit, and that can have a very destabilizing effect too, which brings its own kind of problems. A happy workforce is a good workforce, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. What a lovely note to leave on.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
It's been great.
It's been a good chat there, I think. And thank you to you as well, the listener, for listening. In the event that you would like to contact either myself or Matt, like I say, works for Met Recruitment Limited. They are based in Dudley in the West Midlands. Matt's email address is matthew.hunter@met, which is MET, recruitment.com. Their website is www.metrecruitment.com. Matt's telephone number is 01384 451 880. And I'm sure, Matt, you would be more than happy to hear from anybody should they wish to.
Definitely.
Yeah. I can be contacted on 01274 864 999, and my email address is charlotte@howarths-uk.com. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. Bye.